Thank you so much for joining Alfre and I as we have a discussion about not just the film Clemency, but what's happening in the world right now, what we're up against, what we're seeing, what we're feeling about it, and what we can do about it. I'm so excited. Alfre was a early endorser of work that I was doing here in Los Angeles County around the jail population and getting more mental health care into the jail system. And so when she and her team asked me to join this conversation, I was, yes, yay, let's have this conversation. So let's get to it. I want to start with just asking you about how you came to be involved with the film Clemency. It's a powerful film, it's gut-wrenching, it's clarifying, and I want to know how you got involved.
Bronwyn Cornelius is our producer, and Bronwyn came to me. I lose track of time, so it was 3 years before we actually started to roll. And she said she had this remarkable new filmmaker who's very smart, and her name was Chinonye Chukwu. She really wanted us to meet, and she said she has a script about a death row prison warden. And she said, you two also sort of travel in the same lanes. And I think you would get along quite well, socio-politically as well as artistically. And so I said, okay. And, what happens in this, with the death row prison warden? She says, well, no, you would play Bernadine. Bernadine is the death. And I was like, a death row prison warden, who I just, it's odd because, I'm an educated woman and I've been around,
Yes.
But I had never imagined or thought of a woman as a prison warden.
Yes.
And I figured if I hadn't, then the vast majority of Americans would also be in the same spot. And so that I'm always interested in telling stories that haven't been told or that people don't know about. So that pricked up my ears, and we met. And I read the script, and it was so intelligent, so economical.
Yes.
It was precisely what the moment needed in terms of an aspect of the death row question that we had never put into the mix.
Mm-hmm. Love that. I love that. And exactly what you just said, it offers a new perspective, this film. The point of view of this film is one that we're not accustomed to seeing represented. We have a lot of conversations around what does it mean to represent police officers, death row wardens. I'm wondering, for you, what specifically about this character's journey attracted you to the role? What made you say yes? And was it a quick yes, or did you sort of take some time and read the script and say, okay, you know what, I do want to sort of step my foot into this role?
Oh, no, it was an immediate yes. Because, I know when I start reading a script, I know in probably the first 15 pages, I'm hooked or not. If I'm reading it just like I'm reading the Times or something, just like a narrative, and it might be good, but I haven't connected emotionally to it. So, and I don't get talked into things. So if it doesn't grab me, but then, usually by page 40 and you're reading, but every time, say, my character's name would come up, Bernadine, if something emotionally starts to happen in my stomach, every time that character comes up, then I'm already hooked. And then by 45 or 50, you're praying, okay, don't do something like obnoxious or offensive to, not just to me and my sensibilities, but to anybody. So you're going, come on, and you cheer for it to the end. Like I said, I think I always leave it to, I bring a character as fully as possible to camera. Yes. And I leave it to the filmmaker to put it into the story and use it the way they need to. I really have a problem with actors who kind of do that halfway portrayal of people that we may not agree with or we could fair out dislike. I'm thinking now of Miss Evers' voice, somebody that was against my moral sensibilities, what she did in her walk. But that's not my business to judge. My business is to find that human being, because everybody has a perspective that's unique to them. So that's the journey that I love, because you're always learning. Find the way to look out of their eyes. You leave all yourself behind, the way you move, the way you speak, how you think, and then you let the viewer decide how they feel. We put stories out. If you're putting a story out, it will smack of, intention or propaganda or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
If you are trying to determine how you want people to feel after they've seen it. So what you do is you trust the intelligence of your audience. So with this, though, I had this great awakening and meeting new women. When Chenoya took me on a prison tour, we went to 4 prisons in Ohio, women's medium security, men's medium and maximum security, and of course the row. And the women that I met probably 5 wardens. I know I'm going back and forth like this because I'm on an iPhone and I want y'all to see my eyes on the camera. I'll use SAG-AFTRA members, but I got my acting partner here, Patrisse, is off to my right. But so where'd you go, Patrisse?
I'm still here.
Oh, there, now I see you. Okay. Y'all know we need people around us. We can't function without people. And so when I met, you think, my little girl says, you know what? I want to be a prison warden. Does she tear the legs off of frogs when she's little? What is that? But it was from that idea that we've gotten from what a warden is from film and television through the years. And we know they give very accurate depictions of all kinds of people, right? Mm-hmm. So the women I met, there's 8 women wardens in the state of Ohio, and 5 of them are African American. And when I met the women, I also always go off to learn. I just drop it all, kiss it up to the Godhead, and learn and listen. They were the kind of women that would be in your book club or at your church or your synagogue. I like to be enlightened. I'd like for my prejudices and my assumptions to be overturned. And I had that experience doing this role. All it does, and Chenoya, if you listen to her talk, she wrote this after she worked on the Troy Davis case. And Troy Davis was put to death in the state of Georgia. She worked on his clemency case. And afterwards, in that moment when you're just feeling that life on all of our hands that pay taxes and live in a society that actually has state-sponsored murder, she came upon a letter that was written in an appeal to the governor to halt the execution, that talked about the effect that taking the lives of people ritualistically, the effect it has on the people who are charged to do it, the wardens, the deputies, all the people involved. And so that was their appeal, and it really clicked something in her imagination about bringing that story forward. Because, you gotta know, it's a losing situation for everybody. It does not bring back the person who has been taken violently, or it doesn't, it destroys lives, and they suffer like a PTSD rate commensurate with people that have done multiple tours of duty.
Yes, that's right. And that's so, I think, really powerful to talk about. It's one of the things we don't talk about enough, I think, inside of our movement, or even inside of our conversation around what happens when your job is to hurt, harm, maim, and kill people. When that's literally what you've been trained to do and the laws have protected you to do so, what happens to your psychology? What happens to your spirit? What happens to your relationships? And I'm glad that you brought that piece up around trauma, because we have to talk about trauma, I think, both for the people who are being impacted by that trauma, but also for the people who are enacting the trauma, because trauma is not, there's no dichotomy. If you're enacting trauma, you're also being traumatized in that process. And that doesn't actually create healing for anybody. So I love that. I want to ask you another question. When you met writer and director Chinyoye, you all were working on a successful clemency appeal for Tyra Patterson, who was wrongly convicted of murder and eventually released after 23 years. For someone who's watching this discussion, and this is, something I think about a lot as I go and watch films that may talk about really issues around racial justice, issues around gender justice, and all the other, isms that we're fighting against. But what can people do? What would be the first step that you gave someone who watched the film and they're now watching us? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say start right where you are, because everybody is at a different point in their lives and their beliefs and their practices. You may not be the type of person that goes out with the sign and with the candle into the vigils. But you certainly could, pay attention. I'm sure you can, Patrisse, and we can put it up on the website. Give a list of those people who fight every day, who are working to not only to forestall, putting people to death, but the entire system that our people get sucked into, usually starting at a very early age, to work on justice. And so we don't even get all the way to death row or to being caged interminably. But so there's all those people, connecting, looking at everybody that's working on the different organizations, finding your comfort zone. And it's definitely comfortable, I think, I'm judging, but to be able to sign petitions to, all with the pictures of your food and your, looking up with your lips pursed out, just throw that on there for your friends, and bring it up in conversation, because that's the thing that we had hoped for clemency, was that my hope was that it would play in the malls, like next to the food court, instead of at the Limley and the ArcLight, where, those people tend to read about things anyway and have an opinion. But it was like, no, we want every hamlet and village in the country to be able to talk about this, because it's a part of the conversation that we think will help tip the balance. When I grew up, it was assumed, it was that, you just get fried. I grew up in Oklahoma. My mom was a Texan. You just get fried, because they literally put you in the electric chair then, and it was a gruesome, awful thing. But over the decades, you fight for things as part of the continuum. You never know if you're going to see things change in your lifetime, but somebody fought for you to be standing where you are. Somebody stood up. So you do your part. But I am pleased to know that all over this country that is just awash in guns and the sense of retribution and an eye for an eye and all that the majority of Americans do not want the death penalty now. I think by some estimates, it's, over 65%. So, and that's even without a lot of discussion happening about it. People just decide whether they're for or against. So getting people to talk about things, I think, is a way forward. But yeah, I think you could give us a lot of direction and how to go about making the change, however you moved.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways to show up and make change. There's just not one way. And I think we, often privilege the protest, and people get to the streets. And we've seen, especially during COVID, while there's been obviously a rise of protesting, that there's so many other ways that people have been getting involved. And I love everything that you gave people. Start where you are. Read more books. Read books on the issue. Show up for the conversations, the hard conversations at the dinner table that, you probably rather not have, but have them. We have to have those hard conversations with our family members, with our loved ones. You carry on a family legacy of resiliency and striving and activism. Can you tell us more about that journey, the journey of your grandfather and father, and the influence they've had on your activism from a young age?
Oh my. Well, I just found out about my great-grandfather through Lisa Kudrow's show, the Who Do You Think You Are?
Yes.
Where they, you do a test and they trace it back. Frankly, I was interested in my mother's family because they are wild. They were sharecroppers, and there's a mixture of the Africans and the indigenous people, and they're the colorful ones, and I wanted to know, and there's a lot of lore around them. My father's family was always upstanding, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I'm just going to be honest. They were a little, like one grandmother, Mama Woodard, you just go like, hello, Mama Woodard, you kind of genuflect. You didn't say anything unless she had something to ask you, and then you was to the point. And you never said things like, well, I don't eat. It's like, no, yes, you do.
Right.
But my other grandmom was like, she cackled and, she swore and she dipped snuff and she danced around. But that show features the documents. And so, of course, my father's people being landowners, there were documents to trace. But I gained so much understanding and respect for that thing that by the time it got to my father's sisters and brothers, I thought it was just kind of, stiff and all, and so much family pride. But my great-grandfather there were documents of him as an enslaved 8-year-old. And we follow him through, but as soon as he's in the 1860 census, I think it's 1860, as having paid a poll tax. So as soon as liberation came, and it was typical of all of the freedmen and freed women, that's when all of the colleges sprung up, the companies. We are the original strivers and entrepreneurs and education people. It is just like a friggin' shame that we got kids walking around acting like it is not dope to be smart or to go, So, I mean, we're from people who got their hands cut off for learning a word. Yeah. So we got to reclaim that. Anyway, my grandfather, not only as he moved up out of Georgia to Louisiana and eventually down into an area in Texas, in South Texas, where tons of freedmen came, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but they were all good at farming. It became one of the most fertile and prolific farming communities in the country because they were all ex-enslaved people, and they knew how to talk to that land. Anyway, then my people ran for land. But one thing that my grandfather did, great-grandfather, was he immediately started to figure out how to buy land, and people would come to him, and he would advocate for other freed people to get land and to pass the land. If he was moving, he'd make sure the land was passed along to families. So it is that sensibility, and up to what I was conscious of was my father. Like I said, my father's people were landowners, my other people were sharecroppers, and one of the things that the land teaches you, it is a great equalizer. It don't care who you are. You put your crops in, and it's the luck of the draw what your haul is. And if there is a family around you, even if they're spitting tobacco and calling you nigger every other day, if their crop doesn't come up, then you step in, you feed their family for that winter. Not just scraps, but the same thing your family is eating. And they would do the same too. So it's that sense of really understanding you're all in it together. And it surpasses your ideology, your religious beliefs, and everything else. I mean, I'm sure my father then would have punched out the neighbors that would call him a nigger, but they grew up in a county. It was 6 boys and 6 girls, and they grew up in a county that, they were feisty, but a black boy could get strung up for little or nothing, as they could anywhere else in the country at that point. So it comes from the sense of, him always saying, we grew up with a lot of creature comforts, a lot of love and support, but he'd always say, if doesn't matter if you're having a feast, it's it's illegitimate. It's rancid if there's anybody in your vicinity that is hungry. So
love
it's
that.
kind of a practical activism.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's some questions from the audience. I do have a final question for you, so I'm going to save my question. I do want to take a few from the audience as I'm looking in the chat box.
And I got two for you. So say,
I'm excited.
Y'all know y'all don't have anywhere to go. Just sit down. We can stay for a while.
Hang out with us. Get your coffee, get your tea, get your water. So this is a great question from Bree Klauser. This person.
Oh, Bree. I know Bree.
Bree says, I was so moved by the ending of this movie when the camera focuses on you and you start to cry from every pore of your being as an actor. How did you come to that place in your performance? So technical question for you.
Yeah. You know, if a writer has done their job, you don't have to ever manufacture any part of your performance.
Ooh, that's a beautiful line.
All you have to do is just surrender to it. And to be in that space. You know, in life, people try not to cry. We're always saying, okay, don't cry, keep it together. And so one thing you want to do technically as an actor is never go for it. Go through your script, strike out every stage direction that says she gasped or she's sobbing or he's, you know, apoplectic. You find your character. You put them in that situation. You stay open and you keep your breath flowing and you will get to where you need to go. And I'll tell you, for me, it wasn't hard to shoot Clemency. When I say hard, I mean, it was not devastating. And you wash your face, you take off your wigs and you brush up and you go home. Because, you know, I don't work that way. I work from the story. I'm not a method actor. But the tour that Chenoya took us on.
Yeah.
It took me a month to stop spontaneously weeping because, you know, you're meeting people who we failed. And the people around them failed him. And people's lives are in the balance. So when you're telling a story where there's lives in the balance,
Absolutely.
You get your focus, you go there, you know, you understand your part and as being a witness and what you're meant to do. And then you bring whatever your skills, you know, at playing the music of that is. And you know, we went to a women's prison in Marion, and everybody hair was did, and it was, you know, the warden was all, you know, tarted up, and I was going, what's going on? Well, they had a cosmetology program there, and the lifers ran it. They came up with the idea and they ran it so that when the ladies would get out, they would come in the state and certify them, and then there was a guy, Gary Moore, who was the director of corrections. He had these programs at all the prisons in different things. There was like a welding one and an 18-wheel driving one, but they would bring people in and then they would set up maybe a handful of companies or individuals that would hire people after they got out. And it really affected the recidivism rate. And then there was a big block where all these girls sang and they were practicing and they sang for me. It was just the most angelic thing, a couple of hundred girls. And that's what they did. They sent out these vocal arrangements to sick children around the world, or people who were in pain. And I just thought, and when you're inside, each one we went to, people were referred to by their last name. You know, people. So they were called Miss, Ms., and Mr. And I just felt like, you know what? If they had that choir in junior high school, if they had that cosmetology course at the high school, we may not even see them right now. That's caged. Right. And so anyway, that's the thing. And just walking down the halls of the facility at Chillicothe, people different sizes, the men, and they're all like in their outfits, their jumpsuits. And it is, no matter whether they were gray or just, you know, in their 20s or 30s, you immediately saw the boy in it. You saw that boy, he's in your class. He couldn't sit still. They kept saying, you know, Jamal, you know, get out of here. You're disturbing, whatever. And Jamal can't read in the 3rd grade. And we know that if they're not reading by 3rd grade, the chances are high that they're not going to be there in the 10th grade. So you just saw all of these undiagnosed or abandoned or overlooked or under engaged and facilitated young people.
Yep.
So I got off the track, but that
was beautiful.
So Bree, all I have to do, excuse me, I mean, we had a man who's probably put more people through the process than anybody in the world, because he'd been at 4 prisons in our most active states. And he came and choreographed our executions, and down to everything about it. It was the real deal. And you just walk into a place like that. You don't even have to be playing, and you just
feel it all.
Everything is already there. We actually, a couple of the guys that were being the deputies that were carrying it out, the actual action, they were triggered and they couldn't stay. So we had to replace 2 people. It was that intense.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. Just honest, heartfelt, from the stomach and chest response. It really, I think it matters, especially when we're engaging in films like this, hearing from the actors who are in it, and we're in it day by day, to hear you kind of name that your job is your job, but it was when you went and saw the real life thing is where that impacted you in a particular way. And I think it's so important. You know, the first time I visited a jail, I had obviously visited to go see my loved ones, to go, you know, visit and my father or my brother. But when I went behind the scenes, similar to you, it took me a while to shake off the experience, because it reminds me of, I believe, I'm an abolitionist, so I believe in one day we won't need to use cages to deal with accountability. But I think about plantations, and we go to plantations now and we think how horrific, how terrible. I can't believe we did things like this. And now we have prisons and the death penalty, and we're doing that, and people believe in it. And so it's in these moments where I think where we get to humanize the experience, where the law no longer becomes something that's on paper, but you're witnessing the people who are suffering from the law. Not just the people dying, but the people doing the killing. That too is, I think, very important for us to sort of hold space for. Okay, I have another one from you from the audience. I love this.
I love you, Bree. Bree is in my show with me, the C, all capital letters. It's on Apple, but she is a brilliant actor out of New York.
Thank you, Bree. This is coming from Kenny Diaz. He said, Clemency is a great film and that raises the discussion of human rights. You were interested in bringing activist Fannie Lou Hamer to the screen. Any update on that project?
Daily. Just had a meeting about it last night. So we won't have it this election cycle, but I am determined. I
cannot wait.
I'm determined. I'm so sorry I didn't get to have it for our good brother John Lewis before he transitioned on. But yeah, I'm not gonna let another election cycle pass without it. Oh,
I didn't know that, and just personally letting you know that I am so deeply excited. If there's anything that I personally can do to help make that happen, I am here. Fannie Lou Hamer is one of my biggest heroes, and if you don't know her, everybody, on this on this video, please look her up. Fannie Lou Hamer is a hero of ours.
Yeah.
She is so special.
Actually, people will say to you, if you're a woman actor, and especially one of color, who did you look up to? Who were you impressed by? Who was your role model? Was it Lena? Was it Ruby? I love me some Ruby. Was it all these people? I said, I never looked to the screen or to fabulous people for role models. I had them all around me.
Wow.
But outside of my mother, my father, and my teachers, who were crazy, like beautiful, bold, and forward-thinking women, was Fannie Lou Hamer. She was my first, I didn't do that. I think I was around 14. I remember, I have to do the number, but I remember when the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party tried to be seated at that 64 convention, and LBJ lost his whole wits. Oh, y'all will see it in the movie, but everybody go look at it now. Go read about her. So that he stopped her. Somebody was going to give her a chance to speak on the floor in the middle of the day, and he okay, we could go on about that, but she is the godmother of the American vote. And I love the fact that she was a sharecropper, because we want to embrace all of our fabulous, elevated Black people through the ages. And that's all fine. And we should, because just because we should always celebrate excellence. But my heart is always with the regular people that made a way out of no way, because they're the ones that they're beyond bravery, because them stepping out or stepping up meant curtains right then. That was your life. And Fannie Lou Hamer, Miss Fannie Lou Hamer, was that person that joined up with SNCC. And this brings me to this. We can talk about this for a little minute, and then we'll go back to an audience question. But, thinking about John Lewis, everybody, it's like, he is the conscience of the Congress. He's just wonderful. He is all of that. He became that congressman for life that is, that brought so much consciousness to America. And so we know who John Lewis was. Well, he was not that when he was coming across that bridge, the Edmund Pettus Bridge. He was one of the founders of SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Yep. They meant business. Yeah, they were nonviolent, but their nonviolence was so in your face that it was arresting. It knocked people back. They felt like they had been punched. That's why they acted like, the hornets coming out of a nest. But John Lewis, that's the group that went while everybody else was trying to sit at the restaurants. The SNCC went down to Mississippi and said, we need the right to vote. And all that work they did came out of it was the 65 Voting Rights Act that is under assault every day since. But this is what I think of and I want to talk to you about. Right now, there are a lot of parallels between the Black Lives Matter movement and what it has ignited, and what it had in people's sensibilities, in people's hearts, and in people's actions. That reminds me so much, and reminds so many others, of the role that SNCC. There would not be a civil rights movement with the tangibles that we got, and there would not be the legislation that we got. There would not be the way of life, because civil rights affects everybody's lives, not just Black folks' life, but everybody's civil rights. You guys are in that position right now. How do you reflect on that, and how do you carry it, and how do you plan with it? And talk to me.
I love that question. I was so blessed to be able to start off as a young organizer. I've been organizing since I was 17 years old. So it's 20 years this year that I've been in this work. And some of the first people I learned about were John Lewis, was SNCC, SDS, obviously the Panther Party, SCLC. so many organizations led by brilliant leaders like Ella Baker and Fannie Lou, and that have laid the foundation for what we're doing today. There's no way that any of our work would exist the way it exists right now. I would even say our thought leadership is still has so much to do with what we read, what we heard from many of our elders and ancestors now. And with Black Lives Matter, when we were creating Black Lives Matter, Alicia, Opal, and I, and the, hundreds of other Black folks who sort of rose up out of response, many of responses to Trayvon Martin's death, the response to Renisha McBride's death, the response to Ayanna Stanley Jones's death, Tamir Rice, Mike Brown, and recognizing that while our elders and ancestors were the ones that we looked to, that it was our time to step into this destiny. And that's scary when you realize, oh, you're now the next set of leaders. Like, oh, that's not what I planned for. I wasn't planning to be the next, human rights, civil rights leader in this country. And I argue, globally, when I go to Australia, when I've gone to the United Kingdom and I've gone to Canada, Black people around the globe are fighting for freedom. This is not a civil rights fight. It is a much larger global fight. So, this work is work that I feel so dedicated to and so grateful for. And I feel, with the passing of Congressman Lewis and this moment that we're in, this national rebellion, and watching people in Portland and Chicago stay in the streets, even when, Trump sends federal troops to try to repress protests, all I can think about is for our communities to stay strong, that this is what they always do, and that we have to stay committed and have to stay present. And, tangible things that I think people can show up for, especially this audience who lives mostly probably in Los Angeles.
Well, no, we're all over the country. SAG-AFTRA.
Oh, you're right. It's everybody. Well, let me tell you this. There are two set of elections happening in November. There's a national election. We all should vote. And we all, we all know what to do there. But there's also local elections. And that is critical to me. I feel like, the film Clemency really speaks to, like this, it's very place-based, but it's also about a national conversation. And much of what we've been talking about in our movement is the role of district attorneys who are elected, the role of sheriffs who are elected, often the role of judges who are also elected. And how many times, no shame, but how many times have you gone to the ballot box and you start, you're going to go vote for a president, and you start to look down ballot and you're like, oh, the judge, who's that? Am I supposed to be voting that? Oh, a district attorney, who's that? We don't realize that in our own places and cities and counties, we can do so much work. And we forget, I think, that all of SNCC's work and King's work was first local. Yeah. Selma was the fight was the center of the fight for voting rights. And that county was so important because if they won in that county, they could set a precedent for counties across the country. And then they could set a precedent for the national conversation around voting rights. And that's what we're in. Every time there's a rebellion, every time there's an uprising, I remind people that what we do at the local level matters almost more than what happens at the national, because if we're waiting for 4 years to vote for president and not doing anything in between, we're not actually changing the course of history. We're just sort of rolling with it. And so I really want to, encourage this team, look at your local elections, start asking now what's on the ballot, asking now who's up for re-election, asking now who are these judges, do your research. And I think that's really important for folks right now in relationship to this uprising. If you're part of the protest, great, do it safely. We've been telling people, keep your mask on, wash your hands, be very safe in this global pandemic moment. But there is also a set of local context around elections that I think are so critical right now that people should be leaning into?
Yes, I'm glad you talked about that, because the truth is, who's in those offices, those elected local offices, actually affects your life in a more day-to-day way than the people in Washington. But we do have to flip that Senate and bulk up the House.
We sure do. Okay, I have another question for you. I know you have questions for me, but these are good, coming from the audience. So, Ms. Woodard, suddenly BLM is cracking through Hollywood, and executives are recognizing where there has been no progress. Do you see change happening for actors?
Well, there will be some change. There will be some change because so many people are, Patrisse and I were talking about this before we joined you guys. There's like this moment has been blown open, and we are putting our arms and our legs against the jams to keep that moment open as long as possible, to get through as much practical plans that are deliverables in every aspect, not just our business, in every industry, but very specific things, because people are saying, what can I do? I mean, it is an arresting time, and it took a death penalty being carried out without a trial on an innocent man in front of us. We watched it for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It took that to blow open the people's minds to the point that they'd say, oh my God, well, what can I do? Most people that say it mean it. And we're not into guilting people. We're not into shaming people. It's like, when somebody says, what can I do? Really think of what they could do, practical, that could help move the ball along. And then some people are just saying it because you got to cover your butt. But the thing is, there will be some progress, but it's, old folks in the South who say freedom ain't free. It's got to be fought for and protected every day. You got to protect the progress. That's what we didn't do for Barack, and we see where we are now. So but we'll keep moving forward. Yeah, I'll stop there so we can get other questions in.
Okay, there's a question for me, which is, how can we work together to abolish the death penalty? There's a lot of amazing groups that are working to abolish the death penalty, but one way you can do that is looking at who is your local district attorney. At the end of the day, your district attorney has the power to decide who gets the death penalty. At our county in Los Angeles, many of you probably heard about Jackie Lacey, who's up for re-election in November. She still issues a death penalty. California has some of the highest numbers of people on death row. More numbers in some places in the South. And so I think it matters who is in office, and that's one of the first places you can look into. And then you can work with folks who are working on the death penalty and trying to get rid of it. I'm not a fan, and I want to just be super upfront with this. I don't believe in fighting for life without parole. They call that, another form of the death penalty, when people are left to die in jail. I don't think that's the correct measure. I think we need to get rid of the death penalty altogether without any conditions, and no human being should be taking anybody else's life. And so I think that that's, really, really important. Okay, I have another question for you. This is from Derek Smith. What was the breaking point for you in clemency, the eye-opener, the realization of what your position was as a ward and how America's criminal system is represented from your perspective?
Started that right in the middle of that, right before, from my perspective. My relationship, right after you talked about the warden, I'm not clear about what Derek is asking.
So I'm assuming he's asking from like you as an actor, as the character, not necessarily you, because you're really clear. But yeah, I'm thinking that.
I know where we are now. this is the thing. You know, one of the things I learned is most of the people that I met, they came to that position from mental health or from social services or public health. Now, it's up to us to abolish the penalty altogether. So it's on us, on the society that pays taxes, it sets the laws, and it's a representative government. So we got to get rid of it. Until we do, I frankly would rather have somebody who has worked in mental health with people who are traumatized, or who they have a balance. That you don't want a person that's just from law enforcement or from wherever people come from, that they're gung-ho and feel like, you know, I want to corral all the people that need corralling and have them pay daily for whatever we said they did, which we're finding after people have been killed, have been put to death, that many of them are exonerated. But I would rather have that person in charge that has that facility. And so that's one of the things that I learned, is that they really do, the women I talk to really do feel as if the people who are incarcerated, who are on the road, are human beings. And we saw them at their worst moment. And as Chinonye says, who wants to be judged by their worst moment ever? When, you know, and so, you know, you sit there for 10 years or more, and you're only exposed to just the people on your block, and you know, the deputy, your guards, the small corps, and the warden, and they actually see the people. So suddenly one day, it's like you're at your office and you turn to one of your office mates and say, "Bob, we're going to have to kill you today." I mean, that's what you're doing. Not only is it taking a life, but it is taking the life of somebody that you have worked with every day in your office, another human being. Somebody you see more of that population than you do of your relatives and your friends. That's why if people are married, they're on the second or third, or they don't have them. It's just, it tears apart families, and it tears apart individuals. So the one thing that she could pride herself on, like, I'm a pacifist. I know warriors are necessary and soldiers, but I couldn't be a soldier. You know, I'm a badass and I'll kick ass one day, but I'm too much, I wouldn't be effective. But there are people who have the ability, and everybody needs protection. They need warriors. But the whole point is to honor the power you have as a warrior, and not use it just as, you know, flexing, and certainly not against people that can't match your power. But there are those people that, you know, can say, "No, I'm sorry, you can't go to your mother's funeral. Because if I let you go, I got 2,000 people here. I got to be responsible for it." And, you know, frankly, excuse me, you know, those people in there, they used to hustle and all because they've had to hustle. So you can't put yourself in a position to get played off people. And, you know, so that's another reason I said I couldn't. But to be able to find that person that could say, "You know what? I will stay steady. Everybody can yell at me and all that, but I'm going to make sure you have dignity all the way through. So when you walk down that hall, you know, your knees won't buckle. I promise we will do this." So, which is the commitment they make. And they all said to me, they never put a person through the process that did not thank them profusely for helping them to get through it. And so right at the top, when she's got that execution that is botched, when she says, "I'm good at my job," and then that happens, it completely rattles her. So she's already had that. She's never had that. She's on her 12th, I think, but she's never had that happen. She owed something to the condemned man. She owed something to his mother. She owed something to everything. And so protocol is so important for them, because it keeps everything from flying apart, but also protocol allows us to keep a distance, keep at a distance the actuality of what we're doing. And so that jangles her a little bit. And then you know, it gets in the news whether Anthony is guilty or not. There's all the, so it all happens right at the same time. I'm sure people have debated before whether that person that is going to be executed is guilty. She's heard that. But when she sits there, they all said, we wait for the governor to call with all of our might. We are praying because we know what we have to do if he doesn't call. So they're not, you know, nobody's happy about what's going on. So all of that happens. It's just enough that it shakes her loose, and that's the break. When she can't believe in why in how she believed the nobility of her job. She can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
Does that answer, Derek?
I think it does. I think that does. So I'm going to answer another question from the audience, and then I'm going to ask you a last question.
Let me ask you a last question before you ask my last question.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to answer this question. You ask me a question, then I'll do the last. So someone asked me, I think you pronounce your name Michaeli, I think. Sorry if I botched your name. When did you know BLM was going to be a true movement? Oh, I love that question. There were many moments when I realized, you know, Alicia and I would call each other, or Alicia and I would talk to each other and be like, oh my goodness, is this really like, is this getting bigger? Is this really, this many people know about it? I will say the first time we sort of recognized that it was in popular culture was, I think CSI did a mashup of some Paula Deen and something else, and they had a Black Lives Matter protest sign in the scene, and that's the first time me seeing something that I created in a scene. And so, you know, Alicia and I were talking about it, and we were like, oh wow, so that was a big moment for us. I think the next moment was when the first time BLM went viral, which was after the non-indictment of Darren Wilson, and when, you know, the hashtag just totally hit virility, and people were in the streets getting arrested and doing civil disobedience against that non-indictment. I think we realized, you know, in 2016 when Philando Castile and Alton Sterling were murdered and folks hit the streets again. And then obviously we had a lull, not because we stopped fighting, but the media stopped watching us because 45, the person who's occupying the White House, became the center of attention. And so we kept doing our work. We kept organizing, protesting, strategizing. And then obviously this moment, I think solidified that we're not going anywhere, that they can't get rid of us. And that while many of us experience death threats and experience a lot of hostility, that there's more people on our side now than ever before. That's not just in the polls, while the polls are nice, but also in my experience in the world, there are more people on our side now than they ever were before. And so that feels really powerful to me.
You know, and Michaeli, I'll say, my mother always said this to me. It started when I was little, and in elementary school, it was about personal stuff, but then it became more about the world as I grew up. She would always say, if somebody's telling the truth, you never let them stand alone. And so I know when people say Black Lives Matter, most of us think, who can't say yes to that? Who can't, and anybody that hedges their bets or tries to turn it into something else, you are negating that. And it is just as simple as saying, the sun comes up in the east, wherever you are on the planet. So, you know, you may not agree with every move that, you know, the organization makes. And it is that kind of thing. It's like civil rights. It is a place, it's a consciousness out of which to operate besides being an organization.
That's
and
right.
So so it will express itself in different ways. And you always have to look to see who is the person saying it, and if there's an activity you want to join or do. But it's, it is that thing of, if you have to love people and put them in your prayers, however you pray, if they can't say that Black Lives Matter.
That's right.
Period. I want to ask you this. We've talked about in the conversation, in the zeitgeist, is police reform, defund the police, community and service, qualified people fitting the response of going out into the community when somebody is having difficulty. I know Garcetti just announced the creation of a community safety arm. Give me your ideas about how we move forward. Let's just take LA, since that's where we're sitting, and each city will have different responses, each town, but everybody's got to step up on it, and you have to make a move one way or another. You got to declare as a department, as a city, what you're going to do. So how do you see it? What would be a great plan going forward for LA?
I think that's a good question. And I think there's a two-pronged response to this. There's a city and a county. And I think we have to be looking at both. With the city, unfortunately, Mayor Garcetti has really dragged his feet on showing up for Black lives very early on in the process. And so while some of his efforts recently have been notable, it's only because we've pushed him to do that. And I think it's important for people to understand that. And as we move forward, I think at the city level, our work, our local chapter, who's led by Melina Abdullah, will continue to really challenge the idea that a police department needs $3 billion while, every other social service has way less than that. And in fact, we will continue to challenge this idea that public safety looks like a badge and a gun. And that for us, public safety actually looks like investing in the mental health treatment, into arts and culture, investing into people having access to housing. And so that's going to be the work moving forward. And I think some of what Garcetti has continued to do, Mayor Garcetti, is not be as responsive as we'd like him to be, especially in a city like Los Angeles that's supposed to be this very progressive haven. When it comes to the county side, there's actually really exciting things happening in LA County. There may be a ballot measure that ends up on the November ballot called Reimagine LA, being led by Justice LA, coalition of over 50 organizations, both in Los Angeles and across the country, that could move $1 billion to social services. Mm-hmm. And it's really being seen as an alternative to incarceration ballot measure. And once again, similar to Measure R, it's coming from the ground up. It's coming from the communities who are impacted by things like incarceration and things like sheriff violence. So those are two areas, I would say civic engagement, continued activism and organizing, figuring out ways that we can have radical legislative action in this moment, I think is really powerful. And I would tell people, get involved and join something. Don't wait for the protest to happen. There's something that you do every single day to interrupt and transform our system. And so join something, whatever you're moved by. It may be criminal justice, death penalty. It may be climate change, global warming. It may be issues around animal rights. Whatever you feel moved by, join it and start to invest in changing the system. Okay, so my last question for you is, I love that there has been a huge social impact campaign for this film. You have been out, you and Chinyoye have been out in the world doing events. Before COVID, you were doing events. And now during this moment, you have really made it your mission to talk to so many different people. You just let me know that you were talking about to superintendents of schools about this film. Tell us why that was important for you. And is that always how you approach the films that you're working on with also a social impact lens?
I do, because I feel like we're in the people business. We are, drama or a story is the recreation of a human action. So you got to know the humans before you can recreate them. And it's bad form to mimic somebody, you know, that's minstrelly. And so I don't know how you can build a person and then not care about, first of all, the people that are going to receive your story. I'd like everybody that's watching my stories just they come home after a long day of whatever work they have been doing or looking for work to do, sitting down in your drawers in front of the TV or your computer and just let me tell you a story. And that story might make you laugh or weep or get you pissed off or scare you or make whatever. But since we first stood up on two legs around the fire, that's been the job of the griot. They keep the lore of the tribe. And that is that lore and the recreation of it and the telling of it and the passing it along is what keeps the tribe able to identify itself, and it's for the health of the tribe. Well, we realize now that we're a global tribe, and so that becomes whatever, even if it's beauty shop, when I go to work, I'm going because I want to tell a story. I want to put a story out. A story is not messages in the bottle. We're going to just holler it across the vast water. And so, you know, anytime there's a human being, there is a socio-political aspect to a story. And that's what I love about it. I mean, that's why we create. We create to express, because that's what we do, just like a flower turns towards a light. It is what we do naturally, but it also, it deepens us, and it deepens the human experience and everything around us. So it changes the quality of our days. That's why we sing. That's why we play. And, you know, you guys, some of you actors have heard me say this. Lorca, I love Lorca, who was put to death because he was homosexual, as they said in fascist Spain. But he said the poem, the song, the picture are but water drawn from the well of the people. We give it back to them in a cup of beauty that in drinking they may come to know themselves. So that's the reason we set off every day. We got cameras and zooms and lenses and cranes and all that. But you know what? We still barefoot delivering something that hopefully will change the health of the tribe.
Woo! I mean, mic drop, if there was a mic. Thank you all so much for spending the last hour with us. This was incredible. I learned a lot about you, and I'm following up on Fannie. I'm not gonna forget that.
There's a lot of parts in there.
Oh my God, I'm so excited.
And if I fall down and can't be hit, if I fall down and can't do her, there's the Fannie role. I'm so excited. Say, everybody, you know, I know y'all been feeling it. Everybody has felt this, but you know, we are the drama of the gifted children, us actors, and I feel you. I mean, it is up and down every hour, but just keep breathing. Think of it as a weather condition. It's just passing through. Don't try to hold on to anything and explain it. Just let the weather pass through, because your energy and your sensibility springs from an inexhaustible source. Creativity, the creator. There is no end to it, so trust it. You will work again. You will tell stories. Don't try to figure out what's going to happen. you got here, you were able to have love and joy in the land we just left. And so you will find that, you will recreate, you will create more joy in this new land, even if it looks crazy for a while.
Sure. Oh, thank you. Everybody give a round of applause. I know you can't, but a wave for Alfre Woodard.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, SAG-AFTRA Foundation, for having me. We are so grateful, and we're done with this live stream. Share it. It'll be available. It's a YouTube link. Once it cuts out, you can reshare it with your friends and your family. And to remind you, Clemency is now being shown for free. So check it out. Thank you, everybody.
You have power, strong girl. Bye, everybody.